So let's start by thinking differently about human security from a social scientist's perspective. What is human security? Some say it's a paradigm, a way of thinking about security. Some say it's a policy agenda, though there's dispute about what that entails. As a social scientist, I follow Roland Paris in thinking of human security as the ideational glue that ties together a specific policy domain in world affairs. The Human Security Network. So shown here as a hyperlink network, this community of organizations associated with the concept of human security includes think tanks, international agencies, NGOs, governments, universities, and beyond the centers shown here, the network, as represented on the web, also includes numerous local actors across the planet. And human security is also a highly synergistic network of issues and issue clusters, not just organizations. Peace and security, human rights, justice, humanitarian affairs, etc. Practitioners in this network have revolutionized and transformed the global agenda in the last 2 decades, with one success after another: the establishment of the ICC, the success of the Jubilee 2000 movement, treaties on child soldiers, landmines, and cluster munitions. And all of this is not just lip service. HIV/AIDS rates are on the decline in Africa, dictators the world over are on the run, and the use and stockpiling of landmines and clusters has decreased significantly. But for all these successes, there remain numerous human security issues that are neglected, numerous populations that are underserved. In 2008, my research team held focus groups with human security practitioners to find out what issues they thought were not getting sufficient attention. The answer is a whole lot. Let me give you a few examples drawn from different issue areas in the wider human security domain and compare those to issues that do get more attention. So in the health area, for example, when you think of global health issues, what probably pops to mind is HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. These are highly salient issues that get a lot of press and a lot of donor money. Many organizations have programs to address them. What's not getting talked about? Well, in the area of diseases, research shows that the most problematic ones are not always those that get the attention and resources. For example, HIV/AIDS funding relative to the global burden of that disease is greatly out of proportion to pneumonia. And diseases are not the only or most significant global health issues. Consider traffic accidents, something we tend to tolerate as a fact of modern life, but which kill far more people daily than terrorism, war, or crime, and are in fact the third most frequent cause of death globally for individuals between the ages of 5 and 44. The highest fatality rate, of course, is in the developing world, and many of these deaths could be easily prevented with better infrastructure, stronger governance, and even simple architectural choices like more child-friendly streets or fewer road signs. This issue is now on the UN agenda, but much more needs to be done. Or how about rehabilitative care for burn victims? Burn survivors worldwide suffer incredible pain, stigma, disability, and isolation. Over 6.6 million people are affected, particularly women who suffer burn injuries from accidents, domestic abuse, and increasingly self-immolation. In some parts of the world, burn injuries among children outnumber cases of HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. And, the effects of burns are social and developmental as well as physical. Millions of children in the developing world are kept back from school and a future because they've suffered sudden, life-changing injuries that often bankrupt their families and leave them crippled, dependent, and homebound for life. There are solutions, and much more could be done to prioritize this issue if it received more attention on the global agenda. Another neglected health issue is ophthalmic care. Good eyesight seems to many like a luxury in countries riven by malaria, HIV/AIDS, and diarrhea. But as a health and development priority, ophthalmic care may be one of the most important ways to help improve the lives of individuals in the developing world. In fact, the social and economic cost of poor eyesight in developmental terms is staggering, A World Health Organization study in 2007 estimated the cost in lost output from preventable eye disease at $269 billion annually. And there are neglected issues in other areas as well. Consider conflict prevention and mitigation, which ties together peace and security and humanitarian affairs. An important neglected issue in this area is gang warfare. Human security organizations pay a great deal of attention to armed political violence. But they tend to stress violence carried out by states, either in wars per se or against their civilian populations. And emerging attention to non-state actors tends to focus on terror groups or militias, local violence not aimed at capturing the state, but rather at holding turf in contestation with other local armed groups, is being overlooked by analysts and advocates of human security. In Mexico, for example, drug cartels control significant portions of Mexico's territory, bring in 20% of Mexico's GDP, and possess their own armies. Colombian cartels are experimenting with submarines. Threats to human security in zones where these actors have a foothold are more complex than combating crime or preventing human rights abuses by states. And a few other examples of issue neglect in the conflict mitigation area. In the humanitarian sector, for example, there's been lots of attention to victims of gender-based violence in conflict zones. But what about the specific vulnerabilities of children born as a result of sexual violence? Or there's been a lot of well-warranted attention to detainees in the war on terror. But what about terror victims themselves as a population of concern, a group desperately in need of justice? And there's been a lot of attention to the protection of civilians, but no standardized system exists to actually document how many are dying how, in which conflicts. Some say this should be changed, that in fact an international organization accountable for monitoring civilian protection should be established. Finally, let's consider the area of human rights. Now, the human rights issue agenda has expanded dramatically in recent years, from its earlier focus on political prisoners and bodily integrity rights to economic rights, group rights, and gender issues. But look at some of the issues that are still missing from that agenda. For example, the right to pain relief. Millions worldwide suffer the effects of disease or physical trauma without access to pain medication or analgesia. In fact, in 2007, over 92% of the world's supply of morphine was consumed by North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia. The International Association for the Study of Pain argues this should be changed and is working with health and human rights organizations to change the distribution of pain relief worldwide. Some other emerging human rights issues that have not hit the human security mainstream. The right to choose death with dignity over painful and prolonged suffering. The right not to be forcibly conscripted into the world's militaries. Or how about treating rape in prison as a human rights violation instead of a joke? Now, I'm not here to tell you that these are the most important issues you should be working on in your lifetime as a human security specialist. You might very well argue, in fact, that some of these fledgling campaigns don't even belong on the human security agenda. But these examples do illustrate my broader point, which is simply this, that for every issue that is successfully addressed on the global agenda, many other candidate issues are neglected, overlooked, or marginalized. In fact, as I argued in my book on children born of war rape, sometimes it is the existing issue agenda which directs our attention to some causes and away from others, which helps important global social problems to hide in plain sight. Well, how does this change? How do advocates put new causes on the global agenda? Why do some issues get picked while others fall through the cracks? I'm still exploring those questions in my new book project. I'm not sure I have my final answer, and this week I'm here in Oslo as an observer to listen and learn from the esteemed diplomats, experts, and practitioners gathered here to pave a way forward in the area of arms control. But I will say that in every case where a taken-for-granted social condition has been transformed into a policy concern on the global agenda, it all began with one individual who decided things should change. political entrepreneurs, individuals like Henri Dunant, a Swiss businessman whose concern over war wounded on 19th century European battlefields resulted in the establishment of the First Geneva Convention. Or Raphael Lemkin, who coined the concept of genocide to describe atrocities against ethnic groups. Or Marla Ruzicka, a determined young activist who insisted that her government should compensate civilian victims harmed in its wars abroad and founded a new NGO to promote the cause. After Marla's death in Iraq, her torch was carried by her successors, and now the concept of making amends is making inroads in humanitarian and diplomatic circles and in the practices of warring parties worldwide. The room I'm speaking to today is full of political entrepreneurs, people you may have met like Richard Moyes and Thomas Nash of Article36.org, who are building a new campaign premised on the idea that explosive weapons have no place in populated urban areas. This is a notion that runs counter to everything we take for granted about modern warfare. Then again, when Henri Dunant first presented his proposals to 19th century European elites, his ideas sounded far-fetched as well. But with determination, good networking skills, and persistence, he changed the rules and the very nature of armed conflict. Today, Article36.org and their partners in the Human Security Network are doing the same. The point is, the existence of a political entrepreneur willing to swim against the tide and name something as a problem is the single constant behind all successful cases of global agenda setting. Whether that person is a charismatic individual, a well-known intellectual, or an insider in a global bureaucracy able to use their clout to steer their organizational ship in a new and important direction, savvy entrepreneurship is the single most essential ingredient in political change. That's my message to you as a social scientist. As an educator, I'd leave you the same advice I give my students. As you go out into the world of human security policymaking, think big and think broadly. Keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. Watch for silences. Always be looking between the cracks of the existing issue agenda for what might be missing. Seek out the ideas of those outside traditional elite networks, and draw out from those in power the pet issues they've given up on. Be the one to change their minds. In short, be on the lookout for lost causes as you roll up your sleeves. That is where you will find the human security agenda for your generation. Thank you, and good luck.